About 7 years ago, or it was right after the shooting at Mother Emanuel Methodist Episcopal Church in South Carolina, some folks in our congregation said we need to look at issues of race in a new way, and we need to look at images in our building. And some people, I would say not everybody, but some people were aware we had this stained glass window, and I often say it was like one of these is not like the other, where we've got three reformers at the top of the window, and then we had George Washington, Abraham Lincoln, and Robert E. Lee. And that was always kind of I wonder why they're there. When I first got here 10 years ago, I asked that question, and I was told, well, it was a nod to reconciliation, North and South, but if you know your history, you know Lee and Lincoln never reconciled because of the assassination. Washington was gone, so maybe, but it was also, this building was built in 1960. And so you also have to think of, well, what were the American issues of 1960? We were right in the midst of the beginning of the civil rights movement. Idaho was very, very white then, even more so than it is now. And this was a predominantly, if not all white congregation who probably was not aware, because of systemic racism, that Lee was an image that was not welcoming to all people. Fast forward a couple years, we decided initially we would put a plaque right here on the wall, and that we would kind of share our story. We would be honest about participation in systemic racism, and we kind of thought that would be enough, that we would confess it and repent. And then again, I'd say the world changed, and when we went through the various issues of Breonna Taylor, George Floyd's, then all of a sudden it felt like a plaque was not enough, and it was maybe even going against who we understood ourselves to be as a church that welcomed all people. When some people would come and go, I don't feel welcome in a space where Robert E. Lee is present and looking down on me. So that began the idea that, well, let's remove the window. And our council actually voted after studying it to remove the window. And we voted to remove it not knowing whom we would put in the window, but we would figure out someone to represent. So for a year and a half, the window's been clear. In a sense, we let some light in, you might say, to think about this. And as we started working through the names, one just kept rising to the top because of our connection to the person and their connection to Boise. And that's Bishop Leontine T. And Bishop Leontine T was elected bishop in Boise in 1984. There was a jurisdictional conference of the Methodist Church. She was elected along with two others, and all three were historic elections. So she was elected as the first African-American woman bishop in the United Methodist Church. Her Wikipedia page says she's the first African-American woman bishop in the world, in a mainline denomination, that there were no other. So pretty historic election. She went on to serve as bishop in Nevada and California. We also elected Bishop Sanyo and Bishop Galvin, the first Japanese American male bishop, the first Hispanic American bishop in the Methodist Church, were also elected that day. So it was a pretty historic election. So in the window, you'll find the image of Bishop Kelly. You'll find the names of the other two bishops who were elected. And in the very bottom corner, you'll also see a nod to Martin Luther King Jr. There's an image of Martin Luther King Jr. in the corner, for his name was on many people's list and kept rising to the top. And as we kind of brought the window closer to the mid-1900s, it felt right to add his image also.